welcome everyone. So just a little bit of background of me, topic I don't really like to talk about, but I'm a senior UX designer at Bernardo's and I work in a couple of companies, always like around social causes, so mainly NGOs, governmental organization, mental health products, so this is kind of my niche. And I recently graduated from Smart EdTech at a university called Zurich, and I'm starting another master's because I love studying, and that's child studies in Sweden. So I'm going to talk about the project I did for my master's and kind of interview with my experience of being a learning experience designer. But first I'm going to talk about like what sparked this project, and that's storytelling. So as you see me on stage, which I don't really feel confident at, but I love the storytelling events. I've learned about them still living back in Amsterdam, and this is in Glasgow at Angelika, if I pronounce it right. You can just go up on stage and tell a story, and it has great benefits as I learned. I talked about like really difficult things, and afterwards I felt really relieved for the moment, and also my bravery of going on stage. And I've started to read a lot about fairy tale therapy. Actually, I started with this Hungarian book, which is really great, and I'm so sad that it's not translated into any other languages. But I found similar ones written in English. I recommend to everyone, even if you don't think it's working for you, I promise you, fairy tales really work. And I also want to ask you, is there a lesson from any of the fairy tales while you were growing up you still use today in your own life? If anyone can share, or just think about if no one wants to share. Yeah.
This seems a bit unfair, but like there's Snow White. No, sorry, that's Cinderella. Cinderella and she's got her evil stepsisters. Because my wife is one of two daughters. That brings it really badly because my sister-in-laws are really nice. But I do think of that dynamic. You've got the angel girl and
yeah, that's a good one of the project. So I want to talk a little about why it works, fairy tales, even if you're an adult. And one of the things is that it is symbols and metaphors, like you can project on any of life events happening to you, and that's why it works with children really well, because they can't really say the feeling or the emotion yet, but they know that something going on, and if there is a story that they can put into words, they can express it much better. I also talked a little bit already about projection. They can live through the characters they see in these stories, so they can identify with them. And also there is a therapeutic task. One is the mirror task and one is the crystal task. And mirror task means it's reflecting oneself to the story's characters. So like, for example, you're Cinderella. Or you have the crystal task that you can imagine possible future possibilities. So for example, you can't imagine how an event can end or how you can solve a problem, but you can crystal that within the story. And also, any stories, not just fairy tales, build emotional strengths, and they can help you manage emotions and feelings in a healthier way. So I recommend reading as well. And then it comes to the second part of my project, and that's my research on ADHD, specifically inattentive ADHD. So the difference between the two, I will show later on a persona, but the difference between the two, that usually you think, oh, ADHD, probably that's a kid that moves a lot, always loud, always the child who is in trouble. But actually, there is the child who is none of those, and those are usually girls with being shy, not talking too much, never disrupting class. And my project is mainly focused on those kind of children. Yeah, as I mentioned, like these symptoms are usually hidden and sometimes through adulthood as well, not just in childhood. So it's very hard to diagnose someone with an inattentive ADHD, even though the back of it is exactly like the hyperactive type. So this is just a little quote to imagine what it's like to live with ADHD, and that's something like your brain is always on something else where it has to be. And this is something the child said, that I actually want to listen, but I can't keep my attention and I just get distracted a lot. And I guess that's something a lot of people with ADHD can relate to. Bringing in together the two, what we can do with storytelling for kids with ADHD is from a research that says that it can help children with ADHD, their language skills, sensory processing, and emotional regulation better. Actually, it's true for everyone, not just for kids with ADHD, but especially with kids with ADHD. Here I have a little intersection to talk a little bit about what is the difference of learning experience design and UX design, and later on talk about how I brought learning experience design into my projects, not just UX design. So I made like a little table of what are the key differences. And when it comes to the goal, with UX design, we all know we want to enhance the user satisfaction through usability. Mainly that's the goal. Whereas with learning experience design, we're focusing more on the learner rather than the product itself. So if someone asks me, I usually say that in learning experience design, the product is the content mainly. So we want to have learners to have success and stay engaged throughout the whole learning process. In UX, the focus is in task completion, obviously accessibility in mind, whereas in learning experience design, everything is about the learning outcomes and what learners have taken away from the experience. Key metrics, usability, user satisfaction, we all know this in UX design, whereas in learning experience design, again, learning outcomes is a word you hear all the time, and LXD, engagement and knowledge transfer. And the process is also actually quite different than to the usual UX process, because it's all revolves around the learner. So we get we get to know the user, we get to know the learner as well, but a lot differently than as a user. When we apply learning design, and then we develop mainly the content, so it doesn't matter which platform it sits, mostly it matters what's within the content, and we evaluate based on learner feedback. And the method is also a little bit different, so mainly storyboards. That's one of the key things we use in learning experience design, curriculum design, and the learning object is also a very big one in learning experience design. So back to my project, I came up with like a how might we question, how can we create an engaging and effective serious game using storytelling, and some of the methods of learning experience design. So I've mapped out some of the things I've done, some related to UX, some related to Alex. This is the one I talked about, the learner analysis, which is a lot like empathy map. So these are the things I've done. So these are mainly like personas, but I guess a little bit more detailed than an empathy map would be. So I mapped out what I talked about before, the hyperactive type and an inattentive type. A lot of overlaps yet, a lot of differences as well. And the main thing is that with Ella, you see the personality traits. You wouldn't know for sure if she has ADHD, because she's shy, hardworking, also an introvert, so she would never disrupt anything, whereas on the other side, Emil, he would. So you would have some guesses that something is not going right if he has the hyperactive type of ADHD. Based on the personas and everything I gathered in the research, I started to use Neuroboard to gather all the insights and create problem statements, areas of improvement, and also use, I think it's this one, yeah, how might be questions, and then use the how, now, and wow method to see which ideas are worth taking forward. So this is a methods we know from UX design very well. And then I started to write learning objectives because I thought like combining like what will be, as I said, in the content of the game is really dependent on learning experience design rather than UX design. So here you can see how we would write up in Alex some of the learning outcomes. So for example, by the end of the game, children will be able to express themselves clearly and appropriately during small group. And these are all the ones like I wanted to have my game to have and learners to take away at the end. Storyboarding, also something very often used in Alex theme. So here I mapped out how the flow of the game should look like. So here I already had, like, based on the UX methods, kind of an idea what I want my game to be. So I wanted to combine a physical and a digital product. So kids would get a dice and little tokens, and they could hide it in anywhere, in a big place. And then they needed to collect them, and based on that they would scan the little tokens and make up stories with them, and the app would facilitate the learning about the object. These are items from fairy tales, for example, like a dragon, and then they would learn about the object and what it means in fairy tales, and then they could tell their own stories with the, like, guided, but within like smaller groups. Prototyping, also from UX design. So this is the poster of my game. So as I said, they roll the dice for movement, collect the magical objects, they can make up stories, learn from storytellers, and they can trade and buy. So it has also like the little personalization as well, that they can make something with the objects. This is my very modern physical prototype. So you would get the dice with the movements, you would have QR codes with the tokens. So these are really the physical elements. And this is the digital part. So you would scan the token, and then you would you have a new object scanned. You can learn a little bit about the object, what it means, and you can learn from storytellers as well. So you can learn stories, how it was used. You could also have your network of people who also made stories with this object, and then you can trade as well. Maybe it's on the next slide. Yes, you could have like a collection, and then you can have like a trade center where you can trade your elements. So afterwards, that's also something with LXD that we see the outcomes, whether they meet the needs. And then I wrote up UX goals, whether they meet the need or possibly could meet the need. I focused a lot on accessibility and the ease of use, and then I wrote down like how it's supported within the game. And also the LXD goals, like some of those were the storytelling skills, social learning, creative thinking, and executive function support. Obviously the game has many flaws still, and it won't ever be live, but this is, I think, a good example of like how using LXD and UX together combined can really make a difference for learners. And then just a little code to add it up. So if you add a little magic dust and smooth UX helps learners find their way, but thoughtful LXD helps them to stay excited and calm along the journey. So that was me. Thank you